England, 1558. Not an empire, not a superpower. A bankrupt island drowning in debt, freezing in Spain's shadow, begging for scraps at Europe's table. The treasury is empty, the military is weak, the currency is debased. This isn't the proud nation that will rule the waves. This is a failed state with a new queen and no options. But Elizabeth Barmy has something Spain doesn't. Not gold, not armies, not colonies. She has a willingness to do what broke nations always do when conventional economics fail. She turns crime into policy. Here's what they don't teach in history class. The British Empire was not built on trade, ingenuity, or naval superiority. It was built on state-sponsored theft, piracy as venture capital, robbery as economic policy, murder as investment strategy. And it worked, spectacularly. By the time Elizabeth died, England had transformed from bankrupt irrelevance to emerging superpower. The seed capital for this transformation? Stolen Spanish gold. The business model? Legalized piracy with royal backing. The return on investment, 4,700% on a single voyage. This isn't a swashbuckling adventure story. This is a case study in how desperate governments weaponize criminals, rebrand theft as enterprise, and use plausible deniability to build empires. The methods changed. The suits got nicer. But the game is exactly the same today. Let's establish the baseline. Spain in the 16th century is the global hegemon. They control the New World. They're extracting unfathomable quantities of gold and silver from Mexico and Peru. Spanish galleons crossed the Atlantic loaded with treasure that would make modern billionaires weep with envy. Spain is the superpower. The sun never sets on Spanish territory. Their currency, backed by South American precious metals, is the global reserve. Their military is unmatched. Their fleet dominates every ocean. England? England is a joke. A cold, wet rock on Europe's periphery with a population of 3 million, a collapsed currency, and debts they can't service. They have no colonies, no gold mines, no trade monopolies, nothing. Elizabeth inherits this mess in 1558 at age 25. Her father, Henry VIII, left the country religiously fractured and economically destroyed. Her sister Mary nearly bankrupted them further with a disastrous war. The national debt is crushing. There's no money to build a military, no funds to compete with Spain, no way to play the great game of empire through conventional means. So she doesn't play conventionally, she innovates. If you can't compete legitimately, compete illegally. If you can't fund an official navy, fund an unofficial one. If you can't declare war without getting destroyed, wage war without declaring it. Elizabeth looks at the map and sees opportunity. Spanish treasure ships sailing predictable routes, loaded with stolen Aztec and Incan gold, crossing vast oceans with minimal protection. That's not Spain's gold. Spain stole it from indigenous peoples. So really, stealing from thieves isn't theft, it's redistribution. More importantly, it's profit. Massive economy-transforming profit. The plan is elegant. Authorize private ship captains to attack Spanish vessels, split the loot, and maintain plausible deniability. If they succeed, England gets rich. If they fail, the Crown denies involvement. Zero official risk. Unlimited potential upside. This is the birth of venture capital, maritime edition. High risk, high reward, backed by sovereign authority, but executed by private contractors. It's brilliant. It's ruthless. It's the foundation of the British Empire. The mechanism is called privateering. But let's be precise about what that word means, because the propaganda has been working for 400 years. Privateering isn't some noble tradition of maritime warfare. It's state-sponsored piracy with a legal fig leaf. The fig leaf is called a letter of marque. Here's how it works. The Crown issues an official document, a letter of marque, to a ship captain. This letter grants legal permission to attack and plunder vessels of enemy nations. In theory, it's a tool of warfare. In practice, it's a license to commit robbery with government backing. The beauty of the system is the risk transfer. The Crown doesn't fund the ships. Private investors do. Wealthy merchants, nobles, and yes, the Queen herself, buy shares in privateer voyages. They finance the ships, the crew, the weapons, the provisions. If the voyage succeeds and they capture Spanish gold, the investors get returns that would make modern venture capitalists faint with envy. If the voyage fails and the ship sinks or gets captured, the investors lose their money, but the Crown loses nothing. Privatize the risk, socialize the reward. Specifically, socialize it with the government. The standard split was roughly 50-50 between the Crown and the investors, though percentages varied. Sometimes the Queen took 10%, sometimes 50%, depending on her level of direct investment. This is crucial to understand. Elizabeth wasn't just authorizing piracy. She was personally investing in it. The Queen of England was a venture capital pirate. She put royal money into criminal enterprises and collected dividends and stolen gold. The letters of marque provided legal cover. When Spain complained about English pirates, Elizabeth could shrug and say these weren't official naval vessels, just private entrepreneurs exercising their rights under lawful wartime letters. plausible deniability. Except England and Spain weren't officially at war for most of this period. The letters were issued anyway. The technicality was irrelevant. The point was profit, and the profits were extraordinary. Francis Drake, the most successful of Elizabeth's privateers, generated returns that make modern hedge funds look conservative. His circumnavigation voyage from 1577 to 1580 cost investors approximately $5,000 to finance. He returned with $600,000 in captured Spanish treasure. Do the math. That's a 12,000% gross return. After the Crown took its share and expenses were deducted, investors still cleared roughly 4,700% profit. Let me repeat that. 4,700% return on investment in 3 years. There is no modern equivalent. Even the best venture capital firms, even the most successful hedge funds, even the crypto bubble at its peak didn't generate returns like state-sponsored piracy. December 1578, the Pacific coast of South America. Francis Drake's ship, the Golden Hind, stalks a slow-moving Spanish galleon called the Nuestra Señora de la Concepción. The Spanish call her Cacafuego, literally shitfire, because she's so heavily armed she's supposed to be untouchable. Drake has been tracking her for weeks. He knows she's loaded with treasure heading from Peru to Panama. He knows she's not expecting an English ship in the Pacific. No English ship has ever sailed these waters. The Spanish think they own this ocean. The attack is swift and decisive. Drake's crew disables the Cacafuego's rigging with chain shot. The Spanish captain, thinking he's being pursued by another Spanish vessel, doesn't prepare for combat until it's too late. By the time he realizes he's under attack from English pirates, Drake's men are already boarding. The cargo manifest is stunning. 26 tons of silver, 80 pounds of gold, 13 chests of silver coins, countless jewels and precious stones. In total, approximately half of the English crown's annual revenue captured in a single afternoon. This wasn't warfare. This was a hostile takeover, a leveraged buyout at sea. Drake acquired assets worth more than most English nobles would see in a lifetime, violently and efficiently. The Spanish crew was left alive. The Cacafuego was left floating. Drake wasn't there to sink ships or kill sailors. He was there to extract maximum value and minimize complications. You don't destroy revenue-generating assets. You take the treasure and leave. Drake continued his circumnavigation, hitting more Spanish targets, loading more gold, and by the time he returned to England in 1580, the Golden Hind was so heavy with stolen wealth, it was riding dangerously low in the water. When he docked, Elizabeth came personally to the ship. She knighted him on the deck. Sir Francis Drake, honored by the Crown for services rendered. Services being the polite term for theft, assault, and what would today be called armed robbery on an industrial scale. The Spanish were furious. They demanded Drake's execution as a pirate and the return of the stolen property. Elizabeth refused. She'd just cleared her national debt with Drake's haul. She'd funded the next decade of government operations. She'd proven that Spain could be attacked and bled. Why would she give that up? That stolen gold didn't just sit in a vault. It became seed capital, investment funding, the financial foundation of empire. Elizabeth used Drake's treasure to pay down England's crushing debts. Government bonds that were trading at massive discounts suddenly got paid at face value. Creditors were shocked. England's credit rating improved overnight. Suddenly, the bankrupt island could borrow again at reasonable rates. More importantly, the influx of capital created liquidity in the English economy. Merchants had money to invest, ships could be built, trade expeditions could be funded. The groundwork for commercial expansion was laid with Spanish gold. In 1600, just 20 years after Drake's return, the East India Company was chartered. This wasn't coincidence. The EIC needed startup capital, investor confidence, and a government willing to back aggressive commercial expansion. All of that came from the privateer wealth. The East India Company became the largest corporation in history. At its peak, it had a private army larger than Britain's official military. It controlled India. It dictated terms to China. It generated profits that dwarfed entire national economies. And its original funding? Traced back to pirate gold, to stolen Spanish silver, to the wealth ripped from Spanish galleons by men with letters of marque and royal approval. Piracy became privateering. Privateering became trade. Trade became empire. The vocabulary changed, but the extraction didn't. The methods got more sophisticated, but the core model remained. Use force or threat of force to acquire wealth from those weaker than you, rebrand it as commerce, and call it civilization. Within a century, England controlled global trade routes. Within 2 centuries, they ruled a quarter of the Earth's surface. The sun never set on the British Empire. That empire was built on a foundation of theft, laundered through time into respectability. Every pound sterling descended from plundered Spanish reals. Every aristocratic fortune traced back to shares in privateer ventures. Every grand estate, every noble title, every institution of British power has blood-stained gold in its foundations. They don't teach this version in school. They teach exploration, trade, naval superiority. They don't teach state-sponsored robbery, legalized piracy, and systematic plunder rebranded as economic policy. But follow the money, and the truth is unavoidable. Now ask yourself, did this system ever really end? Did governments stop using private contractors for violent profit extraction? Did the letters of marque disappear or just evolve? Modern private military companies like Wagner Group and Blackwater are privateer fleets on land. State-backed, privately operated plausible deniability built into the structure. When Wagner operates in Africa, securing mineral rights for Russian interests, that's not different from Drake securing Spanish gold for Elizabeth. Same model, different century, state-sponsored hacking groups attacking foreign infrastructure, stealing intellectual property, disrupting enemies. That's digital privateering. Letters of marque issued in code. Government authorization with operational distance. Offshore financial systems hiding wealth, avoiding taxes, moving money across borders through legal gray zones. That's the modern equivalent of pirates laundering Spanish gold through English banks. The mechanisms refined, the technology improved, but the core strategy never changed. Use force, plausible deniability, and legal technicalities to extract wealth while maintaining respectability. Elizabeth didn't invent this, she perfected it. She showed that poverty isn't permanent if you're willing to weaponize criminality, that empires can be built on stolen foundations, that history will forgive almost anything if you win. The British Empire collapsed, but its methods didn't. They spread. Every modern power uses some version of the privateer model. Every government maintains the illusion of legitimacy while funding operations that would be called piracy or terrorism if conducted by individuals. The difference between a pirate and a privateer is paperwork. The difference between theft and policy is authorization. The difference between crime and empire is scale. Elizabeth understood this. She built an empire on it. And 4 centuries later, the game continues. The ships became drones. The gold became data. The letters of marque became classified authorizations and black budgets. But the system she pioneered remains the template for how nations project power while maintaining plausible innocence. So here's the question they don't want you asking. What's the difference between Francis Drake and a modern mercenary? Between a letter of marque and a government contract? Between stolen Spanish gold and extracted Middle Eastern oil? The answer is marketing, time, and the willingness to believe that your side's violence is justified while theirs is criminal. Every empire tells itself it's different, special, righteous. They all believe their extraction is earned, their violence is defensive, their wealth is deserved. And they're all lying. The British Empire was built on pirate gold. That's not a metaphor, that's accounting. Follow the money from the Spanish galleons to the Bank of England and the trail is direct. Your history books lied to you. They gave you adventure stories and noble explorers when they should have given you balance sheets and crime reports. They taught you about Sir Francis Drake the hero when they should have taught you about Drake the armed robber with royal backing. But empires aren't built on truth. They're built on the stories victors tell after the theft is complete and the bodies are buried. This is finance through time. We follow the money so you can see where empires really come from. Now I want to hear from you. Is there any functional difference between historical privateering and modern private military contractors? Between Elizabeth's letters of marque and today's classified authorizations? Are we still playing the same game with different ships? Drop your answer in the comments. Same game or different era?